Classmates bully the weird foreign kid. Then he gives a speech that leaves them in tears. The bell rings, signaling the start of homeroom. The students of Jefferson High chatter as they settle into their seats. Mr. Harrison, the history teacher, steps forward. "Class, we have a new student joining us today," he announces. "This is Amir Qasim. He recently moved here from Syria." All eyes turn toward the doorway. A thin boy with dark, wavy hair and deep brown eyes steps inside. He clutches the straps of his backpack tightly. His clothes are neat but slightly outdated, and his sneakers are scuffed. "Amir, why don't you introduce yourself?" Mr. Harrison prompts. Amir clears his throat. "Hello, my name is Amir. I am happy to be here." His accent is thick, his words slow. He looks down, clearly nervous. Some students exchange smirks. A whisper floats through the room. "Did you hear how he talks?" "Where even is Syria?" someone mutters. Mr. Harrison claps his hands together. "All right, let's make him feel welcome." But as Amir walks to his seat, he already senses it. The invisible wall. The way students glance at him, then quickly look away. At lunch, Amir sits alone. He picks at his food, pretending not to notice the sideways glances from a nearby table. "Did you see his shoes? My grandpa wears those. He smells like spices or something." Amir tightens his grip on his sandwich. He doesn't understand all the words, but he understands enough. As weeks pass, the teasing grows bolder. Kids deliberately speak too fast when talking to him, then laugh when he stumbles over words. Others mock his accent. "Hey, Amir, say library again." The worst is Tyler Jennings, the school's golden boy. Handsome, popular, and effortlessly charming, except to Amir. "Yo, Amir," Tyler calls in gym class. "Back in Syria, do they even have basketball?" Laughter echoes across the gym. Amir forces a smile. "Yes, we do." Tyler smirks. "Yeah? Then why are you so bad at it?" More laughter. Amir swallows hard and lowers his gaze. One afternoon, Amir walks home alone, his hands stuffed in his pockets. A cold wind bites at his face. He hears footsteps behind him. "Hey, Amir," Tyler's voice. Amir tenses. He turns and sees Tyler with a group of boys. Tyler grins. "We were just talking about you, man. You should come sit with us at lunch tomorrow." Amir hesitates. "Really?" "Yeah," Tyler says, slinging an arm around his shoulders. "First, though, tell us, why did your family even come here? Like, what's the deal? You guys running from something?" The others snicker. Amir feels his chest tighten. He steps back. I don't want to talk about it." Tyler shrugs. "Come on, man. We're just curious." Amir shakes his head. "Please, just leave me alone." Tyler laughs. "Dude, relax. No need to be so sensitive." Amir turns and hurries away. He keeps walking, even when he hears them laughing behind him. A week later, the school announces a speech contest for Cultural Awareness Day. Mr. Harrison encourages Amir to enter. "You have a powerful story," he says gently. "You should share it." Amir hesitates. But then he thinks of all the things he's never said. When the day arrives, the auditorium is packed. Tyler and his friends sit in the back, looking bored. "I had a brother. His name was Sami. He was funny, and he loved to tell stories. We used to sit on our rooftop at night and look at the stars." Amir pauses, his voice thick. "But one day, there was an explosion in our city. Our house was destroyed. Sami did not survive." A few gasps ripple through the audience. Even Tyler sits up straighter. Amir's voice wavers, but he presses on. "My parents decided we had to leave. We traveled for weeks, moving from place to place, until we finally made it here. America." He glances at the audience. "But when I arrived, I learned that bombs are not the only things that hurt. Words do too. And sometimes, silence hurts even more." The room is utterly still. Amir looks directly at Tyler. I have been called names. I have been laughed at. People see me as different, strange, but I am just a boy, like all of you. His voice steadies. I lost my home. I lost my brother. But I do not want to lose myself. So today, I stand here to say, before you judge someone, please listen to their story. Silence. Then a single clap, and then another. And suddenly, the entire auditorium erupts in applause. Tyler stares down at his hands, eyes glistening. The next day, as Amir walks through the halls, something is different. Hey, Amir, a girl says, giving him a small smile. In the cafeteria, someone pulls out a chair for him. A gym class. Tyler hesitates, then walks over. Hey, ma'am. Do you want to be on my team? Amir blinks. Tyler rubs the back of his neck. I'm sorry, dude. His voice is quiet. I didn't know. Amir studies him, then nods. Okay. For the first time since arriving in America, he doesn't feel alone. A few days after the speech, Amir finds a note tucked into his locker. Hey, Amir, we're having a study group for the history test. Want to join? Liam and Jake. Amir stares at it. No one has ever invited him to anything before. That afternoon, he finds them in the library. At first, he listens more than he speaks. But when Liam struggles with a question about the Ottoman Empire, Amir hesitates, then explains. You see, my grandfather used to tell me stories about it. The empire lasted for centuries, and Syria was part of it. Liam's eyes widen. Dude, that's actually really cool. Jake nods. Yeah, you should tutor us, man. You know way more than the textbook. For the first time, Amir feels like he belongs. One afternoon, as Amir is packing his books, Tyler approaches. Hey, he says awkwardly. Can we talk? Amir hesitates, then nods. They sit on a bench outside. Tyler exhales. Look, I was a jerk. I didn't know about your brother. I didn't know anything. I just thought, I don't know. I thought making fun of you was funny. Amir looks at him. It wasn't. Tyler nods, staring at the ground. I get that now. I guess I never thought about how it felt on your side. There's a long silence. Then Amir says, Why did you do it? Tyler rubs his hands together. I don't know. Maybe because I wanted to be liked. Maybe because everyone laughed, and it made me feel important. He exhales. But hearing your story, it made me realize how stupid I was. Amir studies him for a moment. Then, surprising even himself, he says, Do you want to walk home with me? Tyler blinks. Yeah, sure. And just like that, the wall between them begins to crack. A week later, Amir's mother notices something new. He's smiling more. You seem happier, she says as they set the dinner table. Amir nods. I made some friends. His mother's eyes soften. That is good, Habibi. Later that week, Amir does something bold. He invites Liam, Jake, and even Tyler to his house for dinner. They accept. When they arrive, Amir's mother welcomes them warmly. The house smells of saffron, cinnamon, and roasted lamb. They sit on the floor, eating with their hands, laughing as they try to scoop up rice with flatbread. This is amazing, Jake says, stuffing another bite into his mouth. Tyler hesitates, then looks at Amir's mother. Thank you for having us. She smiles. You are always welcome here. And for the first time in a long time, Amir feels that this moment, with laughter and food and friends, feels like home. Before he can move, Tyler steps forward. Back off, Tyler says, standing between Mateo and the bullies. The boys hesitate. Tyler's voice hardens. I said, back off. The bullies grumble, but walk away. Amir watches, stunned. Tyler turns to Mateo. You okay, man? Mateo nods. Thanks. Amir steps beside Tyler. Their eyes meet. No words are needed. This time, They are the ones who stand up. Months pass. Amir is no longer the weird foreign kid. He's Amir, the smart one, the funny one, the friend. When another new student arrives, a nervous girl from Ethiopia, Amir is the first to greet her. "Hi," he says warmly. "I'm Amir. If you need anything, I can help." The girl's shoulders relax. And as Amir leads her toward their table, he realizes something. He's not just a survivor. He is someone who can make a difference. One evening, Amir comes home to find his mother holding a letter. Her hands tremble slightly as she hands it to him. "It's from your uncle," she says softly. Amir's heart pounds as he carefully opens the envelope. The letter is written in Arabic, the familiar handwriting bringing a lump to his throat. "My dear Amir, we miss you every day. Your father's shop is still standing, though the streets are not as they once were. Your cousin Layla started school again, and she asks about you often. We are proud of you, Habibi. I hope America is kind to you. Never forget where you come from, but never be afraid to embrace where you are now. You are strong, just like your father." Tears well in Amir's eyes. He clutches the letter to his chest, breathing in deeply. That night, he writes back, "Uncle, I have friends now. I feel like I belong here. But I will never forget home. One day, I will return, and I will tell our story." One morning, Mr. Harrison stands at the front of the class, holding a small envelope. "I have some exciting news," he says. Every year, the district selects one student to receive the Voices of Change award, given to someone who has made a positive impact in their school. He smiles. This year's recipient is Amir Qasim. The room erupts in applause. Amir freezes, his breath catching in his throat. Tyler nudges him. "Dude, get up there." Amir slowly walks to the front as Mr. Harrison hands him the certificate. "You've shown incredible courage," the teacher says quietly. "This is well deserved." As Amir looks out at his classmates, he realizes something incredible. These aren't strangers anymore. They are his friends. A few weeks later, the school hosts a parent-teacher night. Amir's mother wears her best dress, a soft blue hijab framing her kind face. When she and Amir walk into the gym, they're met with smiles. "Mrs. Qasim," Liam's mother says warmly, "I just wanted to say Amir is an amazing young man. My son won't stop talking about how smart he is." Amir's mother beams with pride. Then, unexpectedly, Tyler's parents approach. His father looks slightly uncomfortable, but his mother smiles. "I just wanted to say," she says hesitantly, "that we've seen a change in Tyler, a good change. He's kinder now, and I think a lot of that is because of Amir." Tyler shifts awkwardly. "Mom," Amir laughs. "It's okay." His mother looks at him, eyes shining. Later, as they leave, she squeezes his hand. "I am so proud of you, Amir." And for the first time since arriving in America, Amir truly feels like he belongs. Months pass. The seasons change. One afternoon, Amir and his friends sit on the bleachers, watching a soccer game. "You ever think about what you want to do after high school?" Jake asks. Amir smiles. "I want to tell stories. Maybe be a writer. Or a journalist." Tyler smirks. "Dude, you'd be amazing at that." Amir exhales, looking up at the sky. So long, he felt like an outsider, a shadow in the background. But now, he has a voice, a purpose. He is not just a weird foreign kid. He is Amir Qasim. The morning is crisp, sunlight spilling through the window as Amir carefully opens the envelope in his hands. His heart pounds as he unfolds the letter. "Dear Amir Qasim, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to Columbia University School of Journalism." The words blur as his breath catches. He reads them again, just to be sure. Then, without thinking, he jumps up, racing to the kitchen where his mother is preparing breakfast. "Ami, I got in." His mother turns, eyes widening. Then she gasps. covering her mouth with her hands. Alhamdulillah. She pulls him into a tight embrace, whispering, "Your father would be so proud of you, Habibi." Amir swallows the lump in his throat, nodding. He knows she's right. The summer flies by. Before he knows it, it's August, and his friends throw him a surprise goodbye party at the park. Liam, Jake, and a few others set up a picnic table with snacks and balloons. Tyler grills burgers, flipping them with exaggerated skill. "See, Amir?" he jokes. "You're leaving, and now I'm going to be the most cultured one here." As the evening winds down, Amir looks around at the faces of the people who changed his life. "You guys mean a lot to me," he says, voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd find a home here, but you made it happen." Jake raises his soda can. "To Amir, the future world-famous journalist. To Amir." They all cheer. And in that moment, Amir knows this isn't just a goodbye. It's a promise that no matter where life takes him, he'll always have a place to return to. The day finally arrives. His suitcases are packed. His plane ticket is tucked into his pocket. At the airport, his mother hugs him tightly. "Work hard, stay strong, and always remember who you are." "I will, Ami," he whispers. His friends are there too. Liam gives him a high five. Jake claps him on the back, and Tyler, after hesitating, pulls him into a quick hug. "Go make us proud, man," Tyler says. "And don't forget us when you're famous." Amir laughs. "Never." As he walks toward security, he looks back one last time. His past is behind him. His future is waiting. Amir steps out of the taxi onto the bustling streets of New York City. Skyscrapers loom above him, and the air hums with the sounds of honking taxis, distant sirens, and hundreds of voices blending together. This is it, he whispers to himself. A new beginning. At Columbia University, he meets his roommate, Ethan, a friendly but fast-talking New Yorker. "So, where are you from?" Ethan asked, tossing his duffel bag onto his bed. "Syria," Amir replies. Ethan nods. "Cool, man. Welcome to the concrete jungle." That night, Amir sits by his window, staring at the skyline. He thinks of his mother, his friends, and the journey that brought him here. He pulls out his notebook and writes, "Every story has a beginning. This is mine." Amir sits in his first journalism class, surrounded by students from all over the world. The professor, an older man with silver hair, paces the front of the room. "Journalism is about truth," he says, "about finding the voices that need to be heard. Your job is to give a voice to those who don't have one." Amir grips his pen tighter. "This is why I'm here." When the professor asks them to write a short article about a personal experience, Amir knows exactly what to write. "The first time I realized words could change the world was the day I stood on a stage in my high school and told my story. I didn't know it then, but that moment changed everything." Weeks later, Amir's professor calls him after class. "This is good," he says, tapping Amir's article. "Really good. How do you feel about submitting it to the student paper?" Amir's heart skips a beat. "Really? Really? Really?" Amir's article, "Before you judge someone, listen to their story," is published. That night, he gets an email from a student he doesn't know. "I read your article. I'm from Venezuela, and I've been through something similar. Thank you for telling your story. It made me feel less alone." Amir stares at the screen, his chest tightening. This is what he was meant to do. One evening, Amir's phone rings. It's his mother. "Habibi, I have good news," she says, excitement in her voice. "Your cousin Layla, she started writing. She says you inspired her." Amir smiles. "That's amazing, Ami." They talk for a while, and when he hangs up, he sits in silence, thinking. One morning, Amir gets an email from a major news agency. "Dear Mr. Qasim, we were impressed with your recent work and would love for you to intern with us this summer." Amir can barely breathe as he reads the words again. He immediately texts his friends back home. Guess what? I just got my first journalism internship. Tyler responds first. Knew you'd make it, man. Proud of you. Even though he's miles away, his story is still reaching people. Liam, no way. Dude, you're gonna be famous. Jake, remember us when you're reporting from the White House. Amir laughs, shaking his head. He looks out his dorm window at the city lights, feeling the weight of everything that brought him here. And he knows this is only the beginning. The newsroom buzzes with energy as Amir walks into his internship at the prestigious news agency. Journalists hustle between desks, phones ring, and monitors flash breaking news. His supervisor, a sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Reynolds, hands him a notepad. Amir, we're covering a story on immigrant communities adapting to life in New York. I want you to visit a Syrian-owned cafe in Brooklyn and write a piece about their journey. Amir's heart pounds. His first real assignment. Later that afternoon, he steps into Cafe Sham, the scent of cardamom and fresh baklava filling the air. The owner, an elderly man named Abu Karim, greets him warmly. You are from Syria, yes? Abu Karim asks, his eyes twinkling. Yes, Amir replies with a smile. I came here a few years ago. Abu Karim nods knowingly. Then you understand what it means to leave everything behind. As Amir listens to Abu Karim's story of fleeing war, of rebuilding a life from nothing, he realizes something. This isn't just an article. It's a way to give voices to people like him. That night, he writes feverishly. When the article is published, it gets shared hundreds of times online. Even his professor emails him. This is powerful work, Amir. Keep going. And for the first time, Amir feels like a real journalist. A few weeks later, as Amir is leaving class, he hears a familiar voice behind him. Amir Qasim? He turns and freezes. It's Adam, one of his old bullies from high school. Amir's stomach tightens, memories flashing in his mind, cruel laughter, whispered insults. But Adam looks different. He's not sneering. He's nervous. I saw your article, Adam says. I wanted to say it was really good. And, he exhales. I was a jerk in high school. I never apologized for that. Amir studies him, waiting. Adam rubs the back of his neck. I didn't get it back then. But after reading your story, I do now. I'm really sorry, man. Amir takes a deep breath. The old anger is there, but so is something else. He thinks about how much he's grown. It hurt, Amir finally says, but I appreciate this. Adam nods, looking relieved. I hope you keep writing. You're making a difference. As Adam walks away, Amir feels lighter. Some wounds don't fully heal, but sometimes they can turn into something new. The man chuckles. Great, we'll be in touch. As Amir hangs up, his hands shake. He grabs his phone and texts his mom. Ami, you won't believe this. And in that moment, everything feels possible. One evening, Amir's phone buzzes. It's an unknown number. Hello? Is this Amir Qasim? A deep voice asks. Yes? This is David Miller from the New York Times. I read your piece on the Syrian cafe. We're looking for fresh voices. Would you be interested in submitting something for us? Amir's breath catches. The New York Times? Yes, he stammers. Absolutely. Amir barely sleeps that night. The New York Times wants his writing, his story. He spends days perfecting his piece, a deeply personal article titled Between Two Worlds, An Immigrant's Journey of Belonging. In it, he writes about the feeling of being caught between two identities. The Syrian boy who left everything behind, and the American student trying to carve a future. He writes about his father's shop back home, his mother's resilience, the pain of being bullied, and the moment on that high school stage that changed everything. A week later, the article is published. And then it explodes. Social media floods with shares and comments. Immigrants from all over the world write to Amir. saying his words made them feel seen. Even his old high school post about it. Tyler texts him, "Bro, you just went viral." Amir sits in his dorm room, staring at the overwhelming response. He started writing to tell his story. Now, his words are reaching thousands. A few days later, his email dings. It's from a producer at a major TV network. "Amir, we'd love to have you on our morning show to talk about your article. Would you be available for an interview?" Amir's hands shake. "A TV interview?" He immediately calls his mom. "Ummi, they want me on TV." His mother gasps. "Ya Allah, Amir. This is wonderful." But then he hesitates. What if I mess up? His mother's voice softens. "Habibi, you stood in front of a room full of people and changed their hearts. You can do this." Amir takes a deep breath. "Okay, I'll do it." "Ummi, they want me on TV." The studio is bright. The camera is intimidating. But Amir takes a deep breath as the host introduces him. Joining us today is a young writer whose words have touched thousands, Amir Kassem. The questions start simple about his background, his journey to America. But then the host asks, "What would you say to kids going through what you went through?" Amir looks straight into the camera. "Ummi, they want me on TV. I'd say, I know it hurts. I know what it's like to feel like an outsider, but your story matters. One day, the things that make you different will be the things that make you powerful." The interview ends with applause. As Amir walks out of the studio, his phone buzzes with messages from people thanking him. And for the first time, he truly understands. His voice has power. Weeks later, Amir gets an email from an unexpected sender, Mr. Harrison, his old English teacher. "Amir, the school is hosting a leadership event, and we'd love for you to be our keynote speaker. The students look up to you. Let me know if you'd be interested." Amir stares at the screen. His old high school. The place where everything started. There's only one answer. "I'd be honored." The school auditorium looks exactly as he remembers it. The same stage where he once gave the speech that changed his life. Except this time, he's not the scared new kid. He's Amir Kassem, the journalist, the writer, the voice for those who feel unseen. As he steps onto the stage, the students quiet down. He looks out at them and smiles. "I stood on this stage years ago as the weird foreign kid no one understood," he begins. "But that day, I learned something important. When you share your story, people listen. And when people listen, the world changes." The audience hangs on to his every word. By the time he finishes, there are tears in the room. The applause is deafening. As Amir steps down, a student approaches a shy girl with a nervous smile. "Mr. Kassem," she says softly, "I just moved here from Mexico, and I feel like I don't belong. But your speech, it made me feel like maybe one day I will." Amir's chest tightens. "You will," he tells her. "I promise." And in that moment, he knows this is why he tells stories. This is why he was meant to be here. A few days after his speech, Amir is back in New York when he receives a message on Instagram. It's from Liam's younger brother, Daniel. "Hey, Amir, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in middle school when you and Liam were in high school. I just wanted to say your speech really hit home for me. I've been struggling a lot lately. I feel like I don't fit in. But hearing you talk about your journey made me think maybe things can get better." Amir blinks, his heart tightening. He quickly types back, "Daniel, I absolutely remember you. And I promise you things will get better. If you ever need to talk, I'm here." He hits send, leaning back in his chair. His story isn't just reaching strangers. It's reaching people close to home. A month later, Amir is working on an investigative piece about refugee families struggling to find housing in the U.S. He interviews a single mother from Sudan, Fatima Hassan, who's been living in a shelter with her 2 young children. Her story haunts him. "I work 2 jobs, but no landlord wants to rent to us," she tells him. voice heavy with exhaustion. Amir pours everything into his article. When it's published, something incredible happens. Readers start a fundraiser. People offer housing leads. A nonprofit reaches out to help her family relocate. A few weeks later, Amir gets an email. Amir, because of your article, we finally found a place to live. You have changed our lives. Thank you. Amir stares at the message, emotions crashing over him. His words didn't just tell a story. They made a difference. This is why he does what he does. One afternoon, Amir gets a call from an unknown number. Mr. Qasim, this is Professor Davis from Columbia University. We're launching a new course on storytelling for social change. We'd love for you to be a guest lecturer. Amir grips his phone tighter. A guest lecturer at his own university? I'd love to, he says. The day of the lecture, he stands in front of students just like him, young writers eager to make an impact. He smiles. Stories have power, he begins. They can change minds, open hearts, and sometimes they can even change lives. One morning, Amir opens his email and sees something that makes him freeze. Dear Mr. Qasim, we'd love to invite you to give a TED Talk on the power of storytelling. Let us know if you're interested. He rereads it. Then again, a TED Talk. He quickly dials his mother. Ummi, he breathes. You're not going to believe this. The stage is massive. The red TED circle is beneath his feet. The lights are bright. The audience is filled with people from all over the world. Amir takes a deep breath, and he begins. When I was 15, I was the weird foreign kid that nobody understood. I thought my voice didn't matter. I thought my story wasn't worth telling. He pauses, scanning the room, but I was wrong. He tells them everything, his struggles, his speech. The moment he realized his words had power. He ends with, so if you're out there, feeling like no one sees you tell your story anyway, because one day, someone will listen, and it just might change the world. The crowd rises in applause. As Amir steps off stage, a young man approaches, eyes shining. Mr. Qasim, your story changed my life. Amir smiles. That's why I told it. A week after his TED Talk, Amir receives an email from a well-known publishing house. Amir, your story is inspiring. Have you ever considered writing a book? We'd love to discuss a potential memoir about your journey. Amir's hands tremble as he reads the email. A book? His story in bookstores, libraries, maybe even in classrooms? He calls his mother immediately. Ummi, they want me to write a book. She gasps. Ya Allah, your story will help so many people, Habibi. I always knew this day would come. Amir smiles, tears burning his eyes. Then let's make it happen. The place he was forced to leave. Now, he's back not as the scared boy who fled, but as a journalist, a writer, a voice for those still struggling. He visits his childhood neighborhood, the streets now unfamiliar, buildings reduced to rubble. He sees children playing soccer in the dust, just as he once did. A shopkeeper recognizes him. You are the boy who left, the man says. The one who writes. Amir nods. You give us hope, the man says, smiling. We are proud of you. Tears sting Amir's eyes. No matter how far he travels, this will always be home. 1 year later, Amir's memoir, The Boy Who Spoke, is released. Days later, he wakes up to a flood of messages. His book has hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. His phone rings. It's Tyler. Dude, do you realize what you've done? Amir laughs, shaking his head in disbelief. Months later, Amir is invited to the White House for an event on immigrant success stories. Standing before an audience of leaders, activists, and fellow immigrants, he speaks. When I first came to America, I was just a scared kid trying to survive. But I learned that stories have power. And today, I stand before you as proof of that power. As he steps off stage, a woman approaches, tears in her eyes. My son is bullied for being different, she says. Your story gives me hope for him. Amir clasps her hands. Tell him his story matters, he says. One day, the world will listen. Years later, Amir stands in front of a new class of journalism students, this time as their professor. He looks at the eager young faces before him and smiles. I was once in your seat, he says. I was the outsider, the unheard voice. But I learned something powerful. Every story, no matter how small, has the ability to change the world. A student raises her hand. Professor Qasim, what's the most important lesson you've learned? Amir pauses, thinking back to the scared boy he once was, the boy who stood on a stage and changed his life with a single speech. The lesson is this, he says, voice steady. Never be afraid to tell your story, because one day it might just change someone else's. And as he looks out at his students, he knows his journey has only just begun. Years later, Amir stands on a red carpet, flashes of cameras surrounding him. The documentary Voices Unheard, based on his life and work, is premiering at a major international film festival. As he walks toward the theater, he's greeted by the director, an award-winning filmmaker. Amir, your story is powerful. This film is going to open so many eyes. Inside, the theater is packed. The lights dim and the screen comes to life. The documentary unfolds his childhood in Syria, the bullying in high school, the speech that changed everything. Clips of his TED Talk, his articles, his journey back to Syria, all stitched together into a breathtaking narrative. By the end, the audience is in tears. When the lights come up, a standing ovation erupts. A journalist asks him, Amir, how does it feel seeing your life on screen? He takes a deep breath. It reminds me why I do this, he says. Because stories change lives, and I want to keep telling them. One night after the premiere, Amir gets a message from an unexpected name Liam, the worst of his high school bullies. Amir, I don't even know if you'll read this, but I just watched your documentary and I feel sick. I was awful to you. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I needed to say it. I was wrong. And I'm sorry. Amir stares at the message. For years, he held on to the pain of those days. But now, standing where he is, he realizes something. Liam's words no longer define him. They never did. He types back, I appreciate your message, Liam. I hope you've changed. I have. He doesn't need revenge. He doesn't need an apology to move forward. He already won. A year later, Amir receives an invitation that leaves him speechless. Mr. Qasim, we would like to invite you to speak at the United Nations Global Summit on Refugees and Human Rights. Amir's mother is the first person he tells. Ya Allah, Amir. The United Nations? He laughs. Can you believe it? When the day arrives, Amir steps onto the grandest stage of his life. Before him are world leaders, diplomats, activists, people with the power to change the world. He takes a deep breath. I was once a boy without a voice, he begins. Today, I stand here because someone listened. Because stories have the power to change hearts, to change policies, to change lives. As he finishes, the room erupts in applause. And Amir knows this is no longer just about him. It's about the millions of unheard voices he now speaks for. One day, Amir receives a letter from a man he doesn't recognize, a friend of his late father. I knew your father in Syria. He was a kind, honorable man. Before he passed, he told me, my son will do great things one day. Even if I don't live to see it, I know he will make me proud. I just wanted you to know he was right. Tears fill Amir's eyes. His father didn't get to see all this. But somehow, Amir feels his presence, watching, proud. Years later, Amir returns to Syria again, this time, not as a refugee, but as a journalist, an activist, a symbol of hope. He walks through his old neighborhood, now rebuilt. He sees children running through the streets, their laughter filling the air. At a school, a teacher recognizes him. "You are Amir Kasim, the writer?" He nods. She smiles and leads him into a classroom. On the bookshelf, among dozens of books, sits a familiar title, his memoir, The Boy Who Spoke. The teacher turns to the students. "Class, this is the man who wrote the book you all read last month." The children gasp. A little boy raises his hand. "Mr. Kasim, how did you know you could be a writer?" Amir kneels beside him and smiles. "Because once I told my story," he says, "and people listened." The boy beams. And in that moment, Amir realizes this is the greatest story he's ever told. One morning, Amir wakes up to a flood of messages, all saying the same thing. "Congratulations on your Nobel Peace Prize nomination." His heart nearly stops. He rereads the words over and over. The Nobel Peace Prize is a force for change, a voice for the unheard. His phone rings. It's Tyler. "Dude, you're nominated for a freaking Nobel Prize." Amir laughs in disbelief. I don't even know what to say." "Say you're gonna win it." Tyler jokes. Amir shakes his head. "Even if I don't, just being nominated means my story is making a difference." And that's all he ever wanted. Years later, Amir is now a professor, teaching at one of the world's top universities. One day, he assigns his students a simple exercise. Write about the moment you found your voice. As he walks around the classroom, he sees students pouring their hearts onto paper. One student hesitates, looking unsure. Amir kneels beside her. "What's wrong?" she sighs. "I just feel like my story doesn't matter." He smiles, remembering the boy he once was. "Trust me," he says. "Every story matters. Yours does too." The girl nods and starts writing, and Amir knows he's passing the torch to the next generation. On a quiet afternoon, Amir stands before his father's grave in Syria. It's been years since he left, years since he lost him. He kneels, running his fingers over the carved letters of his father's name. "Abu, I wish you could see me now." The wind rustles through the trees as if whispering back. Tears sting his eyes, but this time, they're not from sadness. They're from pride. Because even though his father isn't here, Amir knows he's watching, and he's proud. At age 60, Amir stands before a massive crowd, delivering what will be his most famous speech. "Many years ago, I was just a boy, the weird foreign kid who thought his voice didn't matter. But I learned something along the way. The stories we tell today shape the world of tomorrow. So never be afraid to speak. Never be afraid to be different. Because your voice can change everything." The crowd erupts in applause. As Amir steps away from the podium, a young boy rushes up to him. "Mr. Kasim," he says breathlessly, "I want to be a writer like you one day." Amir smiles and kneels beside him. "Then tell your story," he says, "because the world needs to hear it." And as he walks away, he knows his story will live on. In every person who once felt unseen. In every voice that dares to speak. And in every heart his words have touched. Years later, Amir's impact extends beyond books, speeches, and journalism. He establishes the Kasim Foundation for Storytelling and Human Rights, dedicated to helping young refugees, immigrants, and marginalized voices tell their stories. The foundation funds scholarships, writing programs, and mentorship opportunities worldwide. At the opening ceremony, Amir stands before a group of young writers. This foundation exists because stories change lives. And your voices matter more than you know. A teenage girl raises her hand. "Mr. Kasim, I escaped war like you did, but I don't know how to tell my story." Amir kneels beside her. "You don't have to know how yet," he says gently. "You just have to start." She nods, eyes shining with hope. And Amir realizes his greatest legacy won't be in books or awards. It will be in the voices he helps to rise. Years pass, and Amir's mother grows older. One evening, he visits her in their family home. The same apartment where she once comforted a scared teenage boy who didn't fit in. She smiles as he enters, her eyes filled with warmth. "Habibi, you have done more than I ever dreamed," she says, cupping his face in her hands. Amir swallows back emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you, Ami." She reaches for a book on the shelf, his memoir, now translated into dozens of languages. "I always knew," she says softly. "I always knew your story would matter." He hugs her tightly, cherishing the moment. Because no matter how far he's come, he'll always be that boy who just wanted to be heard. And his mother, the woman who always believed in him, was right all along. One evening, Amir is in his office when his assistant walks in. "Sir, there's someone here to see you." He says he's an old friend. Amir stands as the visitor enters. It's Liam. His former bully, now older, eyes filled with something Amir never thought he'd see: genuine remorse. "Liam," Amir says, surprised. Liam nods. I had to see you in person." There's a long pause before he speaks again. "You changed my life," Liam admits. "Your speech all those years ago, it woke me up. I've spent years trying to be better. I even became a teacher, so kids like you never have to go through what I did to you." Amir studies him, searching for any sign of insincerity. But all he sees is regret. For the first time in decades, Amir feels something unexpected: forgiveness. "I appreciate that, Liam," he says, offering his hand. Liam shakes it, his grip firm. Maybe the past doesn't have to define them. Maybe even the worst people can change. And maybe, just maybe, kindness wins in the end. Years later, Amir sits at his desk, finishing what will be his last book, his final memoir. Not about pain, not about struggle, but about hope. He writes the last words. "If you ever feel unseen, unheard, or unimportant, remember this: your story matters. The world is waiting to hear it." As he sets his pen down, he looks out the window. The sun is setting, casting golden light over the city, and Amir smiles. Because he knows his story will live on. Not just in books, speeches, or awards, but in the voices he's helped find their own. Amir, now in his late 70s, stands before a packed auditorium. It's his final lecture before retiring from teaching. His students hang on to every word, knowing they are witnessing history. He looks around the room, seeing young faces full of potential. Some of them refugees, some of them immigrants, some of them the weird kid who never fit in. He takes a deep breath. "This will be the last time I stand in front of a class like this. But I want you to remember something. Your voice matters. When I was your age, I was told I didn't belong, that I was too different, too foreign, too strange. But those very things that made me different became my greatest strengths. So, never let the world silence you. Tell your story, because someday, someone who feels alone will need to hear it." The room is silent for a moment, and then thunderous applause. A student wipes her eyes. "Professor Kassem, will you ever write again?" He smiles. "I think my students will carry on my words for me." And in that moment, he knows his legacy is safe. On a quiet morning, Amir sits in his study, opening letters from readers all over the world. One catches his eye. It's from a young boy in a refugee camp. "Dear Mr. Kassem, I read your book. My family had to leave our home, just like you. Sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere. But when I read your story, I felt less alone. One day, I want to be like you and tell my story too. Mohammed, age 10. Amir presses the letter to his chest, his eyes glistening. Even after all these years, his words are still reaching people, still making a difference. And that's all he ever wanted. One day, Amir receives an invitation from his old high school. They want him to visit. As he walks through the halls, memories flood back, the taunts, the loneliness, the feeling of never belonging. But this time, something is different. A plaque hangs on the wall near the auditorium. It reads, "The Amir Kasim Center for Storytelling and Inclusion." He stops in his tracks, staring. The very school where he was bullied now honors his name. A young teacher approaches him. "Mr. Kasim, I was a student here when you gave your speech. That day changed my life. Now, I teach kids like you once were kids who feel out of place. I tell them your story." Amir smiles, his heart full. The past no longer holds pain, only proof of how far he's come. In his 80s, Amir returns to Syria one last time. The country has changed, rebuilt, healing. He visits a school where a teacher welcomes him warmly. "Mr. Kasim, our students have been waiting for you." Inside, a group of children, Syrian refugees who have returned, sit eagerly, books in hand. One little girl raises hers. The boy who spoke, "Can you read to us?" she asks. Amir chuckles, his voice softer but still strong. And as he reads the first line of his memoir, he knows his words will live on, long after he is gone. Years later, Amir sits on his porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. His hands are wrinkled, his body slower, but his mind still sharp. He picks up his notebook and writes a single sentence. Every story has the power to change a life. He sets the notebook down, closes his eyes, and lets the breeze carry his words into the world. Somewhere, a child opens one of his books. Somewhere, a young writer finds the courage to tell their own story. And somewhere, Amir's voice, his legacy lives on, because stories never die. And neither does the power of a voice that dares to speak. Years after Amir's passing, a young woman named Layla walks onto a university stage. She stands behind a podium, looking at the expectant students before her. "Before we begin, I want to share a story," she says. She holds up a book, The Boy Who Spoke by Amir Kasim. "This book saved my life," she continues. "When I was a refugee, I felt invisible. But Amir's words made me believe I mattered." The students listen, hanging on to every word. She smiles. "And now, I'm here because of him. And because of him, I will make sure your stories are heard too." In that moment, Amir's legacy takes root in the next generation, and the cycle begins again. Decades later, in a quiet town, a new library is built. Its name? The Amir Kasim Library of Voices. Inside, shelves overflow with books from writers across the world, many of them refugees, immigrants, and outsiders who once thought their stories didn't matter. A plaque at the entrance bears his most famous quote, "Your story matters. The world is waiting to hear it." A little boy walks in, running his fingers over the words. He doesn't know Amir Kasim's full story yet. But one day, he will. And one day, maybe his story will be on these shelves too. Because words never die. And neither do the voices they inspire. A century after Amir Kasim's passing, a group of schoolchildren dig up an old-time capsule buried beneath their school courtyard. Excited, they crack it open to find letters, photographs, and a dusty old book. The Boy Who Spoke. One of the children, a girl named Hannah, flips through its pages, captivated. "Who was Amir Kasim?" she asks. Her teacher, an elderly man with kind eyes, smiles. He was a boy who believed his voice mattered. And because of that, the world listened. The children gather around as the teacher begins reading aloud. And just like that, Amir's words live again. One of the children, a girl named Hannah, flips through its pages, captivated. "Who was Amir Kasim?" she asks. In a future where technology has evolved beyond imagination, a team of historians and engineers work on a project called Voices of the Past. Using advanced AI, they reconstruct the voices of history's greatest storytellers. One day, a journalist visits the project's exhibit. One of the children, a girl named Hannah, flips through its pages, captivated. "Who was Amir Kasim?" she asks. A holographic figure appears. It's Amir Kasim. Projected in stunning clarity, he smiles and begins to speak. Every story has power. Every voice matters. And if you are listening, then you are part of this story too. This journalist, mesmerized, records the moment for millions to see. Even in a world of artificial intelligence and digital realities, his voice endures. Centuries into the future, humanity expands beyond Earth, settling on distant planets. On one such colony, a space station library known as the Galactic Archive houses the greatest literary works from Earth's history. A young explorer stumbles upon an old collection labeled Voices That Changed the World. Among them is a preserved copy of The Boy Who Spoke. Curious, she opens it and begins reading. Though separated by light years and centuries, the words still resonate. She smiles and whispers to herself, even across the stars, stories never die. And somewhere in the vastness of the universe, Amir Kasim's voice continues to echo through time. Hundreds of years into the future, a historic moment unfolds. A human colony on Mars establishes its first cultural festival, celebrating Earth's greatest thinkers, artists, and storytellers. A young Martian-born student steps onto the stage in a packed auditorium beneath the planet's red sky. She clears her throat and begins. Many years ago, a man named Amir Kasim gave a speech that changed the world. Today, his words reach even further beyond Earth, beyond time. The audience, a mix of humans and artificial beings, listens as she recites his most famous lines. Your voice matters. The universe is waiting to hear it. In that moment, his legacy stretches beyond the stars. In a distant future, humanity makes first contact with an intelligent alien civilization. During an exchange of culture, Earth's representatives present books, speeches, and art to introduce their species. One alien scholar is particularly drawn to the boy who spoke. Reading the translated text, it pauses and then communicates in its own language. This is universal, the feeling of being different, the struggle to be heard. It exists beyond your planet. A human historian smiles. Stories connect us all. Across species, across galaxies, Amir's words bridge worlds. This is universal. The feeling of being different, the struggle to be heard. It exists beyond your planet. A human historian smiles. Stories connect us all. Across species, across galaxies, Amir's words bridge worlds. Eons into the future, Earth is no longer the same. Civilizations rise and fall, but stories remain. In a quiet temple, deep within a futuristic city, a lone scholar recites the last recorded spoken words of Amir Kasim. Even if the world forgets my name, I hope it never forgets my message. Every voice matters. Every story deserves to be heard. Outside, the wind carries the echoes of his words. And though time moves ever forward, one truth remains. Stories never die. Millennia into the future, humanity has evolved beyond physical existence. Consciousness is now stored in vast digital realms, where memories, voices, and stories live eternally. A young explorer in this digital universe stumbles upon an ancient archive labeled Voices of the Past. Curious, she accesses an old file. A holographic figure appears, Amir Kasim. His voice, preserved for eternity, speaks once more. If you are hearing this, then you are proof that stories never die. No matter how much the world changes, one thing remains: the power of a voice that dares to speak. The explorer, moved beyond words, whispers, "Thank you." And across the infinite digital cosmos, his story continues. Billions of years pass. Earth is long gone, but remnants of its history float through space messages, signals, forgotten whispers traveling the stars. One such signal, a faint radio transmission, drifts endlessly. A distant alien civilization intercepts it. They decode the message. A voice emerges. Your story matters. The universe is waiting to hear it. Though they do not know who spoke these words, Something in them stirs. Perhaps, in their own way, they too understand. And so, in a language unknown to Earth, they pass the message on. And so, across eternity, Amir Kasim's voice becomes part of the fabric of the universe itself.